Millions of Americans who suffer from sleep apnea depend on CPAP machines to get them through the night, but it turns out these devices are releasing cancer-causing materials, slowly killing users in their sleep. At a meeting in Las Vegas, RT's Brent Jabbar sat down with attorney Troy Bouck to discuss the dangers of these devices.
Troy, tell us exactly about the safety concerns of these CPAP machines.
Okay, well, basically the CPAPs, the BiPAPs, and the ventilators all use the same type of foam that is used for sound abatement, and that's called PE pure foam. And that foam basically breaks down over time into little pieces, and those pieces get inhaled into a person's lung, and they can also be digested into the person's system like that. And so you can get anything from kidney cancer, liver cancer, nasal cancers we've been seeing, and you can also get sort of inflammation of the lungs. And it can cause significant inflammation of the lungs. And I recently signed up a guy who has sarcoidosis, and I think that's going to be one of the injuries in this case.
And the companies behind these CPAP machines and BiPAP machines and so on, they have to tout the quietness of these machines, because if you've ever been around a loved one or had to sleep in the same room as someone with a CPAP machine, these type of ventilators, they can be very loud. They can be quite a noise nuisance, correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And in fact, for the DreamStation line, which is a very significant product line that Philips advertises, their key advertisement was that it was 64% quieter than the competition. And so this foam was their competitive edge.
And do we know if a company like Philips knew of the dangers of using this type of foam to actually dampen the sound?
Well, I think there's indicia there that they absolutely knew, and I think when all the evidence comes out, we're going to see that they knew. There's no question about it, right? And really, even in the way this recall was set up, we saw that on April 13th of this year, 2021, Philips announced a new product line, the DreamStation 2. And it was supposed to be, hey, this great new product line, but it uses a different type of foam. And then you see just 2 weeks later, on April 26th, they announced in Philips' quarterly report, hey, we're going to have to take a reserve because that old line that we've been selling is dangerously defective. And then 2 weeks after that, they issue a recall of the DreamStation. So they basically announced their new product line, and then they, recalled their old product line.
So it is essentially that they knew there was a problem, but they said, wait, before we do something, let's make sure we have the next product in line set up so that we don't have these issues, so we don't lose any profit.
Brent, you're exactly right. That's exactly how it looks.
And where is the litigation with this right now?
So right now, the JPML panel, which is the federal panel of judges, just decided this past week that they're going to situate this MDL. They actually agreed to form the MDL, and they've issued it to Judge Conte in the Western District of Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh, basically.
And how many people are we talking about being involved? I mean, I know we say that millions of Americans, these are very common devices. I mean, I think we all know somebody who uses a CPAP machine for sleep apnea, because if you don't know about sleep apnea, I mean, you could wake up because of the way it closes your throat and the way the air is actually transmitted through your body, it actually can wake you up hundreds of times, or up to 100 times, that is to say, an hour while you're trying to get a good night's rest. So this is something that affects people and can really be detrimental if you have to struggle with it, and the way we're looking at this right now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Sleep apnea is a serious condition. If you don't or are not able to use your CPAP machine, like in this case due to the recall, you could potentially die because it keeps your airways open. And that's the problem if your airways happen to close up and your system, your internal system didn't wake yourself up to take that extra breath of air, you could potentially pass away.
And then you brought up an interesting point there, because you talked about the FDA and regulators here. I mean, these devices have to be approved, and it's the same thing we see with medication. They have to be approved by regulators in the United States and in any country generally that they're selling these in. So when that's the case, why did regulators miss this?
That's a good question. And it's really because they're not the ones doing the actual testing usually. They're having to rely on the company to self-report. hey, these are the claims that we're seeing in people, contacting us. And if the company simply doesn't transmit them on to the FDA may never know, right? And it's the same with all drugs. The FDA is not the ones doing the testing. They're looking at all the data that the companies produce while doing their testing.
And what is Philips actually saying in response to as these concerns? Obviously, they've done the recall, but what were they saying as far as when we start to see litigation coming forward?
Well, they actually came out and they said, as part of this recall, unless you absolutely have to use these devices, don't use them, except for the ventilators. Ventilators are sort of a life support device, and so they've told people, do not stop using them until you have an alternative device to go to. But for the CPAPs and BiPAPs, they basically said you need to contact your doctor and determine if your doctor weighs the risks versus the reward of using the machine. And that's a lot to put on a doctor. And I've talked to lots of pulmonologists now, and they're quite upset about this because it is basically having a doctor make a medical decision based on information they're not aware of. Because, the pulmonologist that I spoke to said, hey, I don't know how dangerous these machines are. I haven't done any studies. I haven't seen any results. There's no epi studies in there. So how can I make that reasonable decision and tell my patients, oh yeah, continue to use it? Philips needs to be coming forward and bringing this information to us. How dangerous are your machines? You're saying you're recalling them all. You're saying they could be carcinogenic, but what are we talking here? What's the probabilities? What's the chances?
Troy Bauch, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Brent.